He should have found his way into the trash. Fictional crush went a little bit too sideways. I am forever grateful to the god that sent that Libby loan to me. I was her biggest hater. Less fist, more brain. I love rich men throwing their money at me. D and F. They're like fighting each other. Like the Libby loan just slid into my DMs. Head is not always empty. Hi friends, and welcome back to my channel. Did you guys miss me? Because I missed you guys, even though it's only been a week, but I did not do any filming, any video editing, any of that the past week and a half or so because I have just been so sick to the bone lately. I don't know what's in the air. I don't know what I got, but I had the worst cough since like 2018. Like I can vividly remember the last time I was this sick, and it was in 2018. So anyways, let's move on. This video is going to be a 2-for-1. I will be doing the mid-year freakout tag in addition to my Q1 and Q2 reading statistics, so you guys can have a good idea of all the books I read, all the reading data, all the trends, and all of that good stuff in this one video. So it's going to be about a 30-minute or so video. Grab yourself a drink, sit down, get cozy, and we're gonna head right into the statistics. Okay, before we get started, I just want to say that I put all of my creativity juices into this video, especially for the Q1 and Q2 reading data and statistics, because I believe chef's kiss, it came out beautifully, and I will be reusing this template again and again and again, because you bet that I'm not redoing the whole template from start to finish. If you guys are curious as to how I made it, I just used Canva, put together pictures here and there, used free resources like FreePic, and slammed the photos in and made it as pretty as I could. Of course, the inspiration did come from Perpetual Pages. I'll have his channel and links everywhere in the description, in the cards, on the screen somewhere. His video idea, his quarterly reading statistics idea, was probably the stem where I got my idea to present it like this, because he does it so beautifully well. So I am doing something similar to him with my own flavor and pizzazz to it. Okay, let's not get sidetracked anymore and move on to the first piece of data I have for you all, which is my Q1 and Q2 total number of books I read from start to finish. And that amount is 55 books, which blows my reading goal for 2024 out of the water, because my reading goal for 2024 is 52 books. And since I've already accomplished that, I can just take the rest of the year easy breezy relaxation if I wanted to, but that's not the case because I really enjoy reading. Honestly, I think 52 books is already pretty high of a number itself, and moving forward I'm just going to keep it at 52. I know how fast I read, I know what my pace is and what I'm comfortable at, so I think 52 is a solid goal, and I don't see a point in increasing it arbitrarily. Like, I'm reading to have fun, and it's not really a race. I don't even think numbers should be a part of the goal, but that's a whole other discussion. So moving on from that point, let's take a look at the breakdown of how many books I read per month for the first 2 quarters. As you can see, I actually read, like, starting off really little, and then we slowly ramp up. And I mentioned this in my monthly wrap up, the fact that I'm seeing a trend of me slowly reading and ramping up the number of books I read per month. So that piece of data is super interesting to me. However, one thing to note, that the January is just ever so slightly skewed, because I did cheat a little bit and I have 2 books in there that are technically not January. They are like end of December, but I wanted to see how my reading spreadsheet would look like with data. So I did include it as part of January, even though it was the last 2 to 3 days of December. But I'm just gonna brush aside that piece of data and move on to the numbers of pages read per month. As you can see from the graph, June was my highest pages read per month yet, at around 4,000 pages. And surprisingly, March was the least amount of pages read at around 2,000, or even less really. And that's a little bit shocking to me. It's funny how Q1 seems to be me just slowly getting used to reading, ramping up, and picking up my speed, allocating the time to read more. And then Q2, I really take that ball and I run with it. And we can see that between March and June, I basically doubled the amount of pages I read, which is honestly mind-blowing. And all these pages read total up to around 18,600 pages read in total for Q1 and Q2 combined, which Again, mind-blowing. How many books is that? Well, okay, I know how many books that is. That is approximately 55 books. But still, that number just to me is just wow. I love seeing the data. I love seeing this trend, and honestly, I'm just shocked at how much I've read in the past 2 quarters alone. Moving on to my next graph, which is one of the most interesting graph I have for you all today, and it is the numbers of pages I read by day broken down by month. And you can see that day 11, something was in the air. The number is a whole tower. I read almost 1,500 pages worth in the combined 6 months on the 11th day. Though I do know that it's because I think in April, that was the day where I flew to Korea. So I had about 15 hours of just non-interrupt of alone time, me time to just devour books. And that's probably what skews this data up. But I still really enjoy seeing this. On top of this, you can actually see dips on days where I just don't read as much. So let's focus on to the sets of dates I'm talking about, in particular the 15th, the 16th, the 26th, and the 27th. And at the end of the month, you guys can clearly see, okay, the end of the month doesn't count because technically February doesn't have the 31st, 30th, was it June doesn't have a 31st. So we're gonna ignore the last couple of days. You're right. That's a little bit cheating. But the 15th, the 16th, the 25th, and the 26th, for some reason, those days are my least read days of the months, which is really fascinating to me. I don't really know why, particularly in those days, but it seems like I read in kind of like a pattern. I have a little bit of a slump every 10 days, and that's just an interesting piece of data that I didn't know myself. But looking back and thinking about all the reading trends, it makes sense because there are definitely days of the months where I just don't read, and those days do tend to fall at the 10-day cycle and intervals. So really interesting. I'm really wondering if in the next quarter, since we won't have the skewed data of me going to Korea and reading a bunch on the 11th, if actually the 10th and the 11th or so is the day where I just don't read as much or something like that. That's something that I'm going to be keeping an eye out for in the next quarterly update. So now I'm going to do a quick rapid fire of all the months, January through June, of all the books I read. I'm not going to list every single name of them out. I'm going to highlight the books that I DNF, my favorite book of the month, and also my least favorite of the month. Something to note that my favorite doesn't necessarily mean it's the best book out there. It could just mean that it was my favorite book of the month. And the same thing goes for least favorite. I know that in April, or is it June? In May, I don't know, in one of the months, I had such a good reading month that it was extremely hard for me to pick which book was my favorite. And on the same coin, it was really hard for me to pick which book was my least favorite. And when we get to that month, I'll highlight that again. All right, now let's quickly go over the January reads. I did not have a monthly wrap up for January because I did start my channel in February, but quickly going over, I like to note that the first 3 books that you see on the screen technically were December reads, but I'm including it because it helped me figure out my data statistics for my Google Sheets. So we're keeping it there. And the first 3 books does include my least favorite for the month of January, which was Enemies with Benefits. I just realized I'm not a small town kind of girl. I didn't really like the characters. It has the enemies to lovers tropes, but it's the very classic miscommunication, bratty kind of like enemies to lovers. I don't know. You got like it's enemies to lovers is like a whole thing in itself. So I wasn't into that. I wasn't really into the characters, and it was a very smutty book. Like I don't mind smut, but it was just whatever to me. The characters were not lovable. Whatever happened to them was also kind of like ridiculous. Actually, I don't really remember what happened anymore, but I think I gave it like 2 to 3 stars. Now, my favorite book for the month of January was M. Butterfly, which is a play that I read in college. I don't know why I suddenly decided to pick it up, but it's supposed to be a parody of Madame Butterfly, another play. I don't really recall the whole plot and synopsis of M. Butterfly anymore because it's been a couple months, but I really enjoyed it at the time. I felt like it gave really good depiction of how the West views the East, and also it was kind of like a parody with Madame Butterfly, which really portrayed Asian people and Asian women to be very submissive. So I believe the playwright kind of used that against the situation that was happening at the time in Europe. I believe basically an Eastern spy was able to seduce another man into giving like the country's secrets by using their femininity. And it talks a lot about how the West views the East just inherently feminine, and so that they can't even distinguish between male and female almost. So I thought it was a really interesting play and how that dynamic works in the play itself. So I gave it like a solid 5 stars. I feel like I didn't do it justice when I was reading at the time as a college student. As for February, the month overall was just kind of for me. It was a pretty slow month, and honestly, I was afraid that I wasn't going to continue reading because of how many slow / bad books I kind of encountered. But there were just a couple of books that really carried the whole month, and my favorite of the month has to be I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I listened to it as an audiobook, and it was just such a good read. I just love Jeanette's sass, dry sense of humor, and how straightforward she is with the circumstances that she's dealt, but she doesn't try to get pity from us. And there's just something about the way she writes. She was a very good writer, and she articulated her history really well, so I thoroughly enjoyed that. But on the flip side, I did encounter the first Ali Hazelwood book that I did not enjoy whatsoever, which was surprising because I really thought she was the author for me, and I think to this day she still is. But I was this close on buying it at the bookstore, but luckily it came through on my Libby loan, and I am forever grateful to the God that sent that Libby loan to me, because I would have been balding and mad if I bought the book and the ending was what I was received. Okay, so kind of thankful that for some reason the Libby loan just came through, slid into my DMs, and was like, hey girl, read this for free, and the rest is history. You already know how I feel about that book. If you guys don't, there's a bunch of videos of me talking about Ali Hazelwood's books. You guys can go watch it there and see my initial reaction, and also one of my first few videos, which was kind of rough. I think my videos are still a little bit rough, but they were really rough back then. Okay, now as for March was the month where I realized I just need to DNF. There is no reason for me to be reading books I am not enjoying. So we did have 2 DNFs for the month of March. The first is Not the Billionaire, which was honestly, looking back, I think I should have given it 2 stars because I couldn't bear to finish it, even though it wasn't a bad book. Like, it's not a bad book per se. It was such a plain, boring romance. And I don't need boring. I need spice. I need something crazy, and I need that tension, like that burning or that slow burn, anything. The book itself just felt really slow paced for no reason. So kind of a shrugs for me. The next book that I did DNF was He Found Me. And if you guys heard my joke the first time I said it, I'm saying it again. He should have found his way into the trash because it was that bad. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. No hate to the author, but the editor did her wrong. I said this last time too, because I actually saw a video of hers pop up on my For You page on TikTok, and she was talking about how, like, please let me know if you find any spelling errors, grammatical errors, let me know, because her editor really failed her. And I understand that the whole publishing process is really, really hard on the writer themselves, but man, she had an editor, and that editor just did her so wrong. Okay, but that book, unfortunately, the premise, the pacing, the grammatical error, and everything included in it was just really rough, and I couldn't find myself completing the book at all. And onto a lighter note, my favorite book of the month of March was The Broken Ring, one of my hands down favorite series that I have ever picked up, because it was such a unique storyline with unique storytelling, and the artwork was beautiful to the point where I had to pick up the actual physical book itself, the web novel. But translation is a little bit slow. It's currently being translated on Tappy Tunes, and they release, like, it's not even a chapter. I think it's like 3 or 4 pages every couple of days, and it's a little bit expensive. So I've been waiting for them to publish out the actual volumes, because I tried machine translating the actual Korean text. I purchased the book in Korean and translating it, but I don't know, man. I can't handle bad grammar, which is so funny because my grammar, my speaking, everything about me is like, you don't even know how to talk in English, but I need to be able to read perfect English, which is funny, but also depressing. Okay, moving on. I don't know where that came from. I'm sorry. I'm having a lot of fun with this video, and I don't know why. I think it's the fact that no more scripts. Okay, in case you guys didn't know, previously I did script most of my videos because I was really afraid of running out of thoughts. But what I realized in the past couple of videos is that I actually have a lot of thoughts in here, okay? Head is not always empty. But because I was going back the script, I end up repeating myself again and again and again, and the video is just boring. I don't know, I don't like it. So we are off script, and I don't know where that came from, but we're gonna move on to my least favorite book of the month of March, I think, of March, and it was Notes on an Execution. I don't know, that book was not it for me. The way the author wrote was beautiful, and I can really smell like the vivid imagery that she was putting on the text, but the middle part was so slow, she lost me. I understand kind of like the literary concepts that she was trying to bring in about socialism, the justice system, and on whether or not a person can be redeemed if they've done something so gross in society, but it was just so hard to get there, and honestly, she lost me with the plot with the female characters. I understand that that female character is supposed to be presented as a foil to the male character or the perpetrator, but unfortunately wasn't it for me. Really dry read. I'm just trying to pull out like what I remember about it, and I just remember feeling so gross about her vivid imagery because she did it so well, but also seeing how long it took for us to get from point A to point B, and I just dragged my feet, and that was probably one of the biggest reasons why March was such a slow month for me. Okay, now we have officially hit quarter 2 for the month of April, which was technically one of my highest reading months yet because I was on vacation and I had a lot of time to myself just to read and just have fun. And let's talk about the one book I DNF'd in the month of April, and it was Highest Bidder / Highest Bidder Bot. I mean, I don't know. I wanted spice. Like, I don't mind spice. I don't even know why I purchased it. I thought the concept was 50 Shades of Grey interesting, but the execution was a little bit too much. So I just DNF'd it. It was just not the book for me. However, we're gonna talk about the book that got me simping over a male lead, over a father lead, and it is Father, I Don't Want to Get Married, standing at my favorite book for the month of April, and probably one of my favorite male characters of all time, the hottest man known to life, aka go watch the Riz video if you guys want to hear or see images of him. I gotta contain myself now and move on to my least favorite book of the month of April, which was Positively Yours. It's a sweet little manhwa dealing with unexpected pregnancy. I usually don't like the pregnancy tropes in stuff, period. Like, I don't like it. I don't like kids. I'm sorry, I'm just not a kids person, and I don't even know why I picked it up. It was a very highly rated completed one on Tappytoons or Tapas, so I clicked on it, I read it, I went through it, and it was all right. It just didn't stand out to me. It wasn't particularly bad, but it was not a very well-worthy standout manhwa as I expected it to be. I don't really know why. It was rated really high, but also when I searched for books, specifically manhwa and mangas, I try to search for completed ones versus incompleted ones because there are a lot that are ongoing, okay, y'all? Manhwas and mangas are a whole other beast. You can have like a whole series going for like 15 years, Naruto, One Piece, and then we have ones that start off good and then goes off the rails, Jujutsu Kaisen. So I've been trying to reel myself back in and read completed works to see if there's any hidden gems, and unfortunately, Positively Yours was not a hidden gem. It wasn't bad, but it was my least favorite for the month of April. Now May was the best month, y'all. It was the 5th month of the year, and it's a full month of 5 stars. I had so many good books that month. I had to really sit down and think about what book was technically my favorite one, but even then, all the other ones are like, they're like fighting each other like this because all the other ones are still so freaking good. And for me, my favorite one for the month of May has to be Front Desk, for the literary aspect, for the social aspect of it, talking about immigration and dealing with immigrating to America, and I could just feel myself so seen in that book. So I just had to give it to Front Desk. And on the flip side of this, my least favorite book from the month of May was Mr. Wrong Number. So I actually heard a lot of good things about Lynn Painter. I believe that's the author for Mr. Wrong Number, from another YouTuber, Jean Monnet. I'll have her link somewhere on the screen. But basically, all the other books she was reading, she was having a good time with it, right? She's even recommending me to listen to the audiobook of one of her other books. But Mr. Wrong Number was not it, y'all. Mr. Wrong Number was, maybe I just dabbled into the wrong book, but it started off strong, and then the end it was just rushing. Like we're trying to resolve the situation that the author set up within 10 pages, and I cannot handle that whiplash. Okay, so that wraps up May, and now we're on to the last month for this video, which is June. June was also a very solid month. I actually didn't complete the series that I know I was going to rate lower. I just didn't prioritize those books, so therefore they're not on this list. So I also had a lot of books to pick and choose from where I really enjoyed it, and my favorite being Villains Are Destined to Die. You guys can hear me talk about it a little bit more during my reading vlogs, but essentially I really like the reincarnated tropes, but I really like it when they're done spectacularly well, such as this one, where it's a little bit more unique in the character dynamics and in the main character itself. Villainous tropes are very common in manhwas right now. That is like, I believe that is the trend at the moment, where you are reincarnated into a body of a villain. Most of the time, the villains are just really good people, but Penelope takes it to a whole other level. She's scheming. She's trying to find her way through life to survive. So I really enjoyed that refreshing take on the villainous trope, and that's why it has to be one of my favorite reads for the month of June. And since June was such a great reading month for me, the default least favorite for the month of June was Skin of a Sinner, and this one was a recommendation from another YouTuber named Little Toron, and honestly, it was still a really good read. I'm thinking back about it, and I really like Roman Rivera, but he less fist, more brain. But I guess that's the point. Like, you want a macho man, that was the book for you, you know? You want like a gangster macho man who will do anything to protect you but remembers you and babies you. That was it. But it might have not been it at the time when I was reading it. If I was craving something like that, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more, because I realized as I'm learning about my reading behaviors and what I enjoy in books is that I'm a big mood reader, and my mood really impacts on what I would rate a book. A little bit more on that in a later clip for my mid-year freakout tag, because I have an answer to that in the mid-year freakout tag, and you guys will hear more about it in a little bit. All right, now I need to take a little bit of break. Hopefully everything set up is still looking good when I get back. Okay, short Pokemon Go intermission aside, let's talk about the average star rating for Q1 and Q2, which was 4.14, an extremely solid and high star rating. I might have to make a video on how I rate my books, but it is a lot with mood vibes, a lot of what I'm feeling at the moment. I'm not necessarily reading a book for literary intensive purposes, I'm just reading it for enjoyment. So my star rating is usually centered around how much I enjoy my books. And keeping that in mind, let's take a look at the actual breakdown on how many books I gave 1 through 5 stars. And you guys can see that 5-star predominantly dominates my rating, because generally for Q1 and Q2, all the books I picked up were purely based on my mood. I did not do a TBR until June and July. Therefore, the data, it might be a little bit skewed for Q1 and Q2, because I read a lot more books based on my mood. So I'm wondering how Q3 and Q4 is going to go and what it's going to look like, because it might actually be dipping down a little bit since I have TBR books, and I realize that sometimes if I'm not in the mood for the book, I am so afraid that I'm going to be rating it a little bit lower. But I'm actually thinking back on July and seeing how my July reads have been, and my July reads has still been pretty solid, so maybe it won't affect it that much. Of course, we won't know until we see Q3 statistics. All right, book rating aside, let's talk about the books themselves. On average, the books that I read are approximately 414 pages, with my longest book between Q1 and Q2 being The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo at 656 pages, which is wow. I didn't realize how long that book was because I listened to it on audiobook, and I think I binged half of it in one sitting as an audiobook because I was just playing my video game on the side while listening to it. So I did not know where the time flew. I honestly thought it was like a 400-page book, which seemed to be on average the length that I do read. However, that was not the case. It was very close to 700 pages, which is astounding. Not to mention the fact that it was actually one of the first few books that I picked up when I first got back into reading. So pretty surprising on my part. Okay, since The Seventh Husband of Evelyn Hugo is technically a Q1 book, I wanted to see if there was a long book in Q2, and what did you know? The second place for both Q1 and Q2 was the first place in Q2, and that book is Ruthless Nights, coming in at 590 pages. All right, now let's get back into the data and statistics with the next graph, which is the length of the books. And right down the middle, you guys can see the length of the books that I generally gravitate towards is between 300 and 400 pages. Kind of not surprising at all in my end, especially since I've been picking up more physical books as of recently. So I realized that they're generally in the 300 to 400 range. What is surprising is that I read very little amount of books over 500 pages. In fact, I think on the graph itself shows that I really only read 4 or so books that were above 500 pages, which is a little bit of a shocker to me. I didn't realize that I don't like lengthy novels. That is something that I just came to realize after looking at my data and statistics pretty recently. Generally, if it's a super long book, I don't gravitate towards it. I don't know if I'm just intimidated by the book length itself and the size of the book, and that's why I don't gravitate towards books that are over 500 pages, but it's just a nice piece of data to have and to know and to check back on in our next quarterly update. Let's move on to the format breakdown of what I read in Q1 and Q2. All right, the first format we're going to talk about is physical format. So I'm talking about having a hardcover or a paperback copy in physical possession as I'm reading it. It doesn't have to be owned by me. I could have picked it up at the library, and I'm really surprised that it came out to be 16.9%. I really thought it was going to be below 10%. When I first started this YouTube channel and started my reading journey, I am a pretty hardcore Kindle girly, but Costco has converted me into a physical girly because I see the books and I just see how pretty it is. I see all the shelves. I really want to have also a collection of the books that I really enjoy on my shelf as well. So surprisingly, it is at 16.9%, still a pretty solid percentage in my opinion. The next format at the highest percentage at 40.8% is digital, coming at nobody surprises, especially not for me, because I am an ebook girly through and through. So digital basically means I get it from the internet, I get it through Libby, or I purchased it on Amazon or independent publisher's site. Whatever it is, I own a digital copy of it. It's stored on my Kindle, it's stored on my computer. I'm not surprised that it's at 40 something percent simply because it's just what I expected. Honestly, I expected it to be higher, but it's still the highest percentage of my reading format, and that's why I'm not super surprised about it. As for the audio format, I am actually quite surprised that it's only 12.7%, especially given that when I first started my reading journey, I started out as an audiobook girly, but recently I've just been migrating away from audio and into physical books a lot more, mostly because Spotify has a limit of 10 hours a month, and a lot of books are a lot longer than 10 hours, so I run through those credits really quickly. So I think that's why audiobooks is at an even lower percentage than physical books, which if you told me that at the beginning of my reading journey that audiobooks were going to be less than my physical books, I would be shooketh, simply because I really enjoy listening to audiobooks while I'm cleaning the house, while I'm commuting, while I'm doing my skincare. I feel like it's such an easy way to consume books while you're doing something else. So really surprising that I haven't picked up a lot of audiobooks, but I do think I'm a little bit traumatized from The Cruel Prince. I have a bunch of vlogs on it. I hated that audiobook. It really ruined the reading experience for me, considering how much I really enjoy the Wicked King, The Cruel Prince series now in July, but it took me so long to finish it. I think it took me 2 months to finish The Cruel Prince as an audiobook. I think if I had The Cruel Prince as a physical book / ebook, I would have devoured it in seconds, but because the audiobook was not as great of a quality as I expected it to be, it really took away from the reading experience. And since then, I think I haven't really picked up another audiobook. So I'm changing that up now. I'm actually listening to Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow as an audiobook. So I'm hoping in Q3 and Q4, audiobooks will bump up just a little bit. All right, now moving on to a format that should not be a format on itself in this section. I think in 2025, I'm going to redo my spreadsheet a little bit because manhwa and mangas should not fall into this this format because they should either be physical or digital. It's not really correct, but that's what we have. That's what we're working with. And 29.6% of my reads for Q1 and Q2 were manhwa and mangas. I'm not surprised. I've actually been reading manhwa and mangas consistently since forever, and I've only really gotten back into reading novels as of December, November of last year. So I've never really stopped reading. I just gravitated towards a different kind of reading, which was more graphic based. And I think graphic based books have its own quirks as well. I love seeing how the artist renders the emotions on the characters' faces. You definitely lose some aspects here and there, the little details that comes with a novel, but I love seeing how the artist interprets what the original author means and reenacts it on the character's face, or the little detail, or take on their own creative liberties with the artwork and create much more of a cutesy romantic moment. So it's a push and pull between the two. I'm still heavily invested into manhwa and mangas. I think it's a totally different kind of reading, but reading nonetheless. And so I always mention it in my videos. I feel like they don't get the credit that they deserve. Reading is reading. If you are consuming a plot, a storyline of some sort, whether it's via audio, whether it's via digital, physical, manhwa, artwork, whatever it is, if there is a plot line to be consumed, if there is a storyline to be consumed, it is reading, period. That is my stance, and that is my hard stance. And that is why my videos will always include audiobooks, physical books, ebooks, manhwas, mangas, graphic novels, all that good stuff. Why did I just go into like a whole beat? We'll never know. All right, let's move on to the piece of data that I'm always the happiest to see, which is the amount of money I saved from using Libby, my local library, Spotify, Stuff Your Kindle Day, and I saved approximately $320 between Q1 and Q2. Is it as much as I have hoped it to be? No, honestly, I thought it would be in the 500s, okay? Maybe that was a little bit ambitious of me, but I really thought it was going to be about 500. What I realized is that in Q2, I started buying books a little bit more, so that's probably why the numbers went down. And in fact, actually, I think 2 of the months make up for about 2/3 of the amount of money saved. So that's also something to give you guys a little bit more perspective on, because I believe Q1 had the most savings, coming in around like $150. And then I think one of the months in Q2, we had about $80 saved in a singular month. So I'm just saying there's a lot of skewed data up and down. Okay, now we're at the final stretches. Let's talk about the top 3 genres for Q1 and Q2. How do I depict genres? It's a little bit hard, and the data is a little bit skewed just because of how I break down my books. Essentially, if I'm reading a series, all the books in the series will have the same genre tag. So if I went on a binge of, let's say, The Wicked King, The Cruel Prince, Queen of Nothing, we're going to have 3 data inputs of the same tags. So every book can have up to 3 genre tagged to it. We don't have to use up all 3 slots, but I try to pick the genres that best fit that book in every single slot. So for The Cruel Prince, I put down dark, mystery, and fantasy. I do believe in the second book, The Wicked King, I put down dark, fantasy, and romance, because there is a little bit of romance in the second books, but generally it would be a copy and paste of the first book, dark, mystery, fantasy, across 3 books. A little bit of skewing of data there, except it's a really skewing, I don't know, it's confusing to me. I don't have a degree in statistics or anything like that, so I'm not really good at depicting what is good data and what isn't, but this is what it is on my list. Coming in at number 1, romance. Are you surprised? I'm not surprised. No one who has been with me for a long time on this channel should be surprised, because every month, all I'm ever talking about is romance book, because that is the number 1 genre that I enjoy my book the most. I do read literary books here and there. I do read out of my comfort zone every now and then, but romance is my tried, true, and tested. And in the second position, we have historical. I read a lot of manhwa historical, so this is not a surprise to me that it is in the second place, only being by romance, because they're usually hand in hand. And then on top of all of the historical romances I read, the third most genre that I read is contemporary. So you can't be both contemporary and historical, so both of them are battling it out with each other for second place. And historical just so happens to win because of how manhwas and mangas are generally broken down, because manhwas and mangas are generally broken down by volumes, and I read a lot of manhwa and manga. So historical won just barely, okay, but it's still won in second place, and then we have contemporary in third. On top of the top genre, I also wanted to include nonfictions that I read in Q1 and Q2. I only read 4 nonfictions for both of these quarters. The first one being Not That Bad. Second one is I'm Glad My Mom Died. Third is White Tears, Brown Scars. Last, but definitely not least, Sociopath, a memoir. And the reason why I wanted to include it is because while I read a lot of fiction and a lot of romances, I think nonfiction memoirs and literary pieces can be so fascinating and so insightful as well. So I wanted to have a little spot to highlight these books. So going forward, I'm still gonna be including special sections that I feel like the books really stood out to me. And it just so happened for that Q1 and Q2, I found that all of the nonfictions that I read were very solid and very well done and very good nonfiction. And I would highly recommend anyone who's interested in dabbling into nonfiction memoirs and whatnot to read any one of these 4 books. Now, the next section is going to be a little bit more fun, and it is my top categories. What is the difference between categories and genres? I actually don't really know myself. I gotta be honest. Okay, I have a vague idea because I set it up, but essentially genre is like the general genre that you would tag a book. Every book can kind of fall into 1 or 2 genres, but categories I like to think of as more of tropes or themes of the book. So some examples you guys might recognize would be LGBT, friendship, fates, mates, arranged marriage, enemies to lovers. They're just common categories that I recognize in books that I would just like to tag and point out just for my own sake. However, once again, we're going to go for the number 1 top in my categories that is skewed by how many manhwa and mangas and a very particular category that I enjoy. It is regression / isekai. This is going to be hard to explain for those who do not read books that have regression and isekai. Isekai being a more commonly used trope in manhwas and mangas, meaning they get reborn into a different life with the knowledge of their previous life. So a good example is Villains Are Destined to Die. Penelope, the main character, actually played a video game where the main character of the game, Penelope, is going through all these trials to survive to the end of the story. However, our main character, our main female protagonist, dies in her world and then gets transmigrated, isekai'd into the video game. And inside the video game, she has knowledge of how most of the paths are taken, what the characters' personalities are like. So she uses this knowledge to her advantage to try to survive in this whole new environment or world. So that is the best way I could explain it. And it is my number 1 category that I've been reading for Q1 and Q2. Not surprising since I read a lot of manhwas and mangas, and a lot of manhwa and mangas are isekai regression type stories. Now, my second most read category is marriage of convenience / arranged marriage. I'm surprised by it, but I'm not mad at it. It's like an unexpected surprise because it makes sense, but I don't really go out of my way to pick up marriage of convenience books. It just so happens that a lot of novels that I read, along with some of the manhwas I read, contain the tropes of arranged marriage. And when they're done well, I really enjoy because you really get to see this strangers to friends to lovers, or maybe sometimes strangers to enemies to lovers, or a fun one is always enemies getting arranged together and then married. So that's probably why it's second place. It's not something that I actively look out for, but when it's done well, I really enjoy it. Now, the third place of my most read category is one that I am not surprised about, and it is enemies to lovers. I mean, we already talked about this. Ali Hazelwood is the queen of writing enemies to lovers. She really likes that trope. All of her books have that trope. And honestly, I really dig enemies to lovers, especially when they are done right. They're just so fun to see. The interaction, the banter, the wit, and the back and forth, and their realization and falling in love with each other. Beautiful when it's done well. So I'm not surprised at all about the third place. And with that wraps up my Q1 and Q2 reading statistics. What did you guys think about it? Did you guys like it? Did you guys like the format? I put my whole artistic brain into this, okay? So you guys cannot say you guys don't like it, because if you guys do, I will cry. I hope you guys enjoyed the graphic content. I think as a visual learner and someone who really enjoys visual content, this is something I really enjoy seeing in quarterly statistics video. That's also one of the reasons why I really enjoy seeing Perpetual Page's quarterly statistics. Something about seeing those those numbers and pages just rubs the right spot in my brain, and it makes me so happy. At this point, I have no idea how long this video is, so I hope you guys are enjoying the video so far, because we still have one more part of the video left, which is the mid-year freak out tag. We are in July. We're actually at the end of July, but I don't care about timeline and frames. As long as the video is out, it's there. Anyone who wants to watch it, just do it. Just do the video. Don't worry about the time frame. I feel like I used to be so bogged down by I need to upload this video by X amount of day or else I can't do that. Nah, we're not doing that here. So if you want to do the mid-year freakout tag and it's September, December, do it. Mid-year can be whenever you start reading from, all right? Because I think that's a more realistic way to do it. We can see an influx in June, but that doesn't mean you have to stop there. So I'm not going to stop there. And tangent aside, let's go right into the mid-year freakout tag. Okay, the first question to kick off the mid-year freakout tag is my favorite book so far of 2024. And this was a really hard one for me to pick, but I'm gonna go with two because nobody here is enforcing the rules. Who makes the rules? Absolutely nobody, and I'm not gonna follow to any of them. So my favorite book of 2024 is going to be three books, maybe. Let's go for the first one. Is going to be Front Desk, which is a story about a child immigrant learning to adapt and assimilate to the American culture. I really felt myself seen in that book, and therefore I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think it's going to be my favorite book of 2024 just in general. As for my favorite romance of 2024, it's going to be yours truly. As I said this in multiple videos previously, I love the relationship between Bree and Jacob. I felt so seen as somebody with social anxiety who is a little bit introverted, don't like to meet new people. I felt like this depiction was perfect and beautiful. I loved it. I love the characters, and I love that Jacob realizes and recognizes his love for Bree, and he's willing to go out of his comfort zone for that. It's just that little special act of service that he did that made me really enjoy the book and love it even more, because I could relate to just how hard it is to do that when it's just not in your nature. But of course, we can't talk about my favorite books without talking about my favorite manhwa. As of right now, my favorite manhwa is Villains Are Destined to Die because of the artwork, the plot, and just the overall vibe of it. It was beautiful. I enjoyed it. As I said in my other videos, I caught up to where the latest chapter of the manhwa is and immediately went in search of the novel and purchased the rest of it just to read it and find out what happens next, because the storyline is just so unique, and I feel like the artwork adds a lot of color and depth to the storyline itself as well. Question number 2 is, what is the best sequel I read in 2024 so far? And as of quarter 2, I actually started a bunch of series, but I have not read the second book or the sequel to any of them, except for Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters. I gave this book 4 stars initially, and it's a pretty fine read, even if it feels a little bit filler-like and fluff. I felt like there was a reason why the author executed that way, and it had really good execution. I could just feel the fluff and filler-like vibes from this book, which is probably why I gave it a 4 at the time. However, it's still by default technically the best sequel, but it's still a pretty good book. So that's not to say that I'm dissing this book at all. I'm just letting you guys know that this is technically the only sequel I've read so far in the first half of 2024. But if we want to include manhwa and mangas, I'm just saying manhwa and mangas can go up to like 1,500 pages long in terms of web novel, because a lot of manhwas are originally web novels and it gets adapted and drawn out, which is something I wish would happen in American novels. Like if you have like a good book like yours truly, I would love to see like a drawn adaptation of it. I think that would be pretty interesting and cool, no? But that is not the point of this question. So for manhwa and mangas, I'm gonna go with Marriage of Convenience. Yes, it is its own category. No, I'm just kidding. That's actually the name of the manhwa. It's Marriage of Convenience, and technically the series is completed. And I finished the series in 2023, I think. I actually don't know when I read this, and I'm still keeping up with it because even though the main story is completed, we have epilogue, and by epilogues I mean basically a whole other book of side stories where they go on like a whole new adventure, like it's a whole other storyline within it, and I'm gonna consider that as a sequel, and it's so good. I'm like hooked. It's like its own good book on itself, so I'm considering it as a sequel to the original story, since we're following the same characters but we're learning more backstories of other characters and a lot more backstory of the male protagonist. protagonist, and we get to see where their little daughter goes in life, right? So that has to be my favorite sequel, period. But I don't have it logged in any of my reading data because technically it's ongoing, and then ongoing series is like a whole other mess, right? As I said in my June monthly wrap up. So highly recommend Marriage of Convenience if you are looking to dabble into manhwas. It's completed, it's so good, so romantic, and just has a different vibes because this is actually a regression story versus an isekai. Regression meaning they lived out their life already, and when they die, they go back to a certain point of time. So it's very similar to the Seventh Loop Villainous, but in this case, she relives her life and she's learning from her mistakes and learning from information that she knew from her previous life to secure her place in this life. Question number 3 is, what are some new releases that I want to read? And I'm going to take this question as books that are recently released in the past couple of months that I have not read yet. And I have a whole bunch of them. The first being Just for the Summer. Then we have King of Sloth. Next up is Leather and Lark. And last, but definitely not least, is A Promise of Peridot. So those 4 are my anticipated reads, but I haven't gone around to them due to the fact that my TBR board game has not been in my favor recently. And I've been reading a lot slower than I was expecting, which is kind of surprising. Actually, no, not surprising because I was sick the past week or so. But here's to hoping that my TBR board game for the next month will be in my favor. I missed this question, but I'm gonna post-edit, squeeze this question in, and it is, what is my most anticipated release for late 2024? I know why I actually forgot about this question. It is because I don't have one. I tried to use the Goodreads latest release feature, and unfortunately, none of the authors that I read are coming out with anything, and everything that was on like the general genres that I like to read just didn't speak to me. So unfortunately, I do not have an answer to this one, which is probably why I forgot it in the first place. So the next question is a fun one for me, and it is, what is my biggest disappointment of 2024? And it took me a bit of time to collect my thoughts, see what book were actually disappointments. And I'm gonna have to go with one that's like an obvious answer, which is Not the Billionaire. I picked this up on Stuff Your Kindle Day. I'm a billionaire girly, okay? I enjoy a good billionaire romance. I love rich men throwing their money at me. It was just not hitting it. It just felt so bland. It was the blandest romance book that I could have read, and I like my billionaires to be spicier than that. You know, you have money, throw that money around. I don't want no good boy. Actually, I do like good boys, but only on some occasion. Anyways, that's just like an easy upfront answer. Not the Billionaire was just not an expected read, a disappointment read, and I DNF'd it and gave it 3 stars. However, we're gonna have a fun answer for this one, which is Not in Love. Yes, I know, I gave it 5 stars. I did give it 5 star. It is staying at a 5 star because of moods and vibes alone, but it was not giving what it was supposed to give, okay? And what I mean by that, while I really enjoy the book as it is on its own, the whole point of this book was forbidden romance, forbidden affair, enemies to lovers, opposite sides of a takeover, all this tension, and there was no tension. They get right into it. There was nothing. Like, literally what happens is that they're like, oh, I think we have this little tension. Let's bang it out and see if it works. Oh, so banging out didn't work. Let's just keep banging it out. I mean, I enjoyed the smut. It was good. But it was not giving what it was supposed to give plot-wise. I wanted to see the tension. I wanted to see the angst. I wanted to see the back and forth, the banter between them. Him and her being on the opposite sides of a takeover. But we didn't get that. And that in itself is a little disappointing. Do I still think Not in Love is a 5 star? Yes, because I love Ali Hazelwood and I love the writing in this. I like the story as is, but how it was originally marketed was a disappointment because the original marketing, when I dabbled into it, was a completely different expectation. And I can see why the people who bought the book with those expectations started rating it lower because they just weren't feeling it. Makes sense. Thinking back, it makes sense. If I came in thinking and expected that and I didn't get that, I would have rated it 2 or 3. However, the way she writes, she just writes the correct amount of spice, the correct amount of stuff. It was also at the right mood and time for me. I just read a lot of books that were more serious topics or just more YA, and I wanted some spicy, steamy romance, and this kind of fulfilled that need. So that's why it was 5 stars. I'm gonna keep it at 5 star, but is it the most disappointment of 2024 so far? Yes. Yes, we have a 5-star read that is one of the biggest disappointments of 2024, where I'm gonna let that sink in and move on to the next question. Now, on the flip side of this is what is my biggest surprise for 2024? And it has to be Butcher and Blackbird. Butcher and Blackbird is a dark romance that I dabbled in after He Found Me. I mean, you guys already know what I thought about He Found Me in the previous clips and whatnot, but I dabbled into Butcher and Blackbird and I was pleasantly surprised. I don't know what I was expecting. It just came through on a Libby loan. I was like, oh, a dark romance, 2 serial killers. I like Criminal Minds, you know? So we're gonna go into this. I'm expecting it to be gory and disgusting and very vulgar. And while it was that, but it was also so funny with like such great banter. I had so much fun reading the book, and I was so happy that it was the week that I chose to vlog, because that vlog, I don't know, I was able to capture myself thoroughly enjoying the book, and you can really see the surprise I have when I'm reading the book and also my enjoyment of it. It's definitely a big surprise there. It was one of my dark romances that I thoroughly enjoyed and got me wanting to read more dark romances. The next question is, who is my newest fictional crush? And if you guys watch the Riz book tag, you already know that it's going to be Jacob from yours truly, or if I could have him, Regis from Father I Don't Want to Get Married, because he is one fine of a character, okay? That's all I could say, period. Fictional crush went a little bit too sideways with Regis, and now I'm no longer functioning. But yes, also Jacob. I really like Jacob. I feel like we can both be Akko Tacos together, you know? Basically, Regis and Jacob are my newest fictional crush, to nobody's surprise. Now, taking aside the fictional crush, let's talk about my favorite character in general in 2024, and it is Mia from Front Desk. I felt like she was me as a child, even though we're not technically the same ethnicity and race. She was just what I experienced, all the feelings I felt, and everything about it. She was such a good and well thought out character, and she embodied the idea of a child immigrant so well. It is not to say that it is one to one with everybody's experiences and whatnot, but the core concepts and the key concepts are there, and it just made me really enjoy reading her and wanting to see more about her characters. I believe there are multiple books after Front Desk also following Mia, so I will be continuing the series and just seeing how she grows up. Like I said, I really saw myself in her, and that's probably why I really like her as a character. The next question is a little bit hard on my end because I don't really get emotional in books, and also I don't really read books that make me sad. So it's gonna be hard for me to answer this question, which is, what is a book that has made me cry? I have not cried in any of the books that I've talked about so far, but the book that is the closest to it has to be Love Theoretically. It's kind of cheating because technically I finished this at the end of December, but I'll include it anyways. Love Theoretically, specifically the scene where Elsie finds out that she didn't get the job, just broke me. Like, it just made me feel so heartbroken for her. The job market is tough, right? So just finding out that you didn't get a job like that on the street from somebody who wants to be your friend. Like, it's just, there's so many layers of convolutedness, and the way she just took off running, like, I felt that in my soul. Did I cry? Not really, but I felt such a surge of emotion and relatability to her, even though I've never been in that instance. It just feels kind of true to what I would do if I were ever in that situation. But if you guys want to make me cry, have any good book recommendation that is tearful, that will make me cry, drop it down in the comment section and I will add it to my TBR. I'm definitely always looking to expand my reading range, so maybe some tearful cries might be good for me. Maybe I'll let out some of that steam and emotion and the buildup of craziness inside of me. Now, this question is the opposite of the last, and it is books that made me happy. And one that I'm gonna have to rename again is Butcher and Blackbird. I have a whole vlog about it. I'm laughing, I'm having a good time, I'm smiling, I'm cracking up. It was such a good book. It made me so happy. I enjoyed reading it so much just for the pure entertainment aspects of reading that book. It was just something else about that book. That book was the perfect amount of comedy and dark aspect and romance aspect. So 10 out of 10. I would love to be able to re-experience it again as a an audiobook version, and I think I'm going to try to squeeze out maybe some time in the future to reread it as an audiobook. Okay, question number 12 is, what is the prettiest book I purchased in 2024? And it has to be Five Broken Blades. And if you guys have watched my vlogs, you guys know I purchased this on a whim because of an aesthetic reason. But look at the edges. It's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, I have no regrets. And you can see that I clearly protected it with wrapping. This is kind of like the library wrapping that you see. Yes. Did I put it on it myself? Absolutely. You know why? Because I'm so afraid of ripping the covers. If you guys know anything, you need to know anything about me, is that I will easily mess up the covers if I don't have a protective sleeve on them. So I thought it would be a really good idea to include them in my hardbacks from now on. And on top of that, look at the inside. It's so pretty. And then the actual hardcover book itself is also gold with this beautiful embellishment. So overall, definitely the prettiest book I purchased in 2024 so far. But I do have a runner-up because yes, I went to Costco once again and I was drawn in by the pretty book, and it is The Night Ends with Fire. So this is supposed to be a Mulan mixed with the Poppy War, and I really enjoyed the Poppy War, so here we have it. The sprayed edges isn't as pretty as the other one, but the book itself is, and this is like a much heavier and harder hardcover than the regular books. Also, the inside, absolutely stunning, gorgeous. Again, the inside is Never Trust a Dragon. Everything about this is gorgeous. So therefore, The Night Ends with Fire is the runner-up for the prettiest book I bought in 2024. Question 13 is, what books do I want to read in 2024? And I think I'm going to list out some series that I want to finish. Ideally, I finish my TBR, but I have over 100 books on that list and it's never ending. So I don't think it's physically possible for me to read it. So we're gonna go with some sequels of series that I am dying to know what happens next. The first being Ruthless Vow. It's the second book of the Divine Rival duology. I thoroughly enjoyed the first one. Like, I did not know how much I enjoyed it until I read it, and I really liked it. So I'm really interested and invested on seeing where the story progressed in the second book. The next one up is the third book of the trilogy, The Queen of Nothing. This one follows Jude after everything that has happened in the first and second book. I know I hated on Jude a lot, okay? I know that. I was her biggest hater in the audiobook in the first book, but she's really grown on to me and I'm really enjoying the series, which is surprising. It's like an unexpected surprise. I'm really glad that I continued on with the series and I continued reading with Chronically D, Chris, because it gave me the motivation to read through the book. And by like the first third of The Wicked King, I was heavily invested and I was fully immersed into the book by that point. The third book as part of a series that I want to finish is The Dragon's Republic. This is the second book to, I don't know if it's a trilogy, but to the Poppy War series. And we ended the Poppy War on like such a high note, and I just want to know what happens next. I know that Jessie really likes the second book and it's her favorite sequel of 2024 so far, I believe. I think that's what she said in her mid-year freakout tag, and I really want to know why. I need to know why. So that's also on my list to be read for 2024. Now, aside from the sequels to the series that I've been reading, I also want to dabble outside of my comfort zone and get into thrillers. So I actually picked up Home is Where the Body Are by Geneva Rose. I have only heard good things so far, I think. My memory doesn't work, so I'm just gonna assume I've definitely heard about this, okay? And I'm gonna assume everything I've heard about it is good, which is probably why it's on my TBR. So we have Home is Where the Body Are. I'm looking to get into thrillers. I feel like I would enjoy them because I really like true crime and all of that stuff. And then we also have The Disappearance of Rachel Price. I know that Lauren really enjoyed that book, and that's also a thriller book that I'm hoping to get into. So we also have that on my list of getting out of my comfort zone. And I think that is it for the must finish for 2024. I'm sure there's like a bunch of other books that I don't have on top of my head, but I know for sure I want to finish those series because it's so good and I need to know what happens next. And now we finally made it to the last question to wrap everything all up. It is my favorite book to screen adaptation of 2024. This one is going to be anime related because once again, we are going back to mangas and manhwas. It's going to have to be Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer. Yes, Yes, I know how all of that is going. I know what the ending of Demon Slayer is, and I know where Jujutsu Kaisen currently is at. But if you guys do not watch anime, I feel like starting out with those two anime is great because the artwork and the animation studio gave it their all. It's beautiful. I got into those series because of the animation itself and because of the anime. That's probably going to be my favorite adaptation from book to screen. And with that, we are finally done with this long mega compilation video. My voice is hoarse. I am tired, but I'm so glad to be back and filming this. So definitely let me know down in the comment section anything that you have on your mind. Did you guys like the beginning with the quarterly statistics? Did you guys like any of my answers? Like not in love? Because when I realized that that was technically one of my biggest disappointments of 2024 so far, it made me crack up because I gave it 5 stars. But looking back, I was just like, this was not what I signed up for at all. Like zero, zilch, nada. But I enjoyed the ride. It's like when you bought a ticket to a movie and then the movie just, okay, that's exactly the same. I don't know what I'm saying. It's been like 2 hours since I started filming. So anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, I would greatly appreciate it. You guys can like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys next week for my TBR board game. We're back. We're gonna see what we get for the month of August to complete my 2024 collection. And I will see you guys then. Bye!